Oi, oi, all right, how's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is the Doodle Review. I'm very, very excited to share with you today a new episode of Our Band in Three Albums. This is the show where I speak with bands, with artists, with musicians, and I ask them if you had to describe to someone else what your music sounded like using three albums that aren't your own, what would they be? Today I'm joined by Matthew Marcantonio of British rockers Demob Happy. Now, Demob are a band with three killer records under their belt and a fourth on the way, which is really exciting. If you're a fan of rock from the glory days of the 60s and 70s, but would like that with a little grittier, riffier, modern twist, you need to check these guys out. And you should check out the three solid recommendations we go through today as well. This is an ongoing series, and I think it's a pretty great one. I've linked the other episodes down below. I've spoken with Predeceased, with Mean Jeans, and Crohn's. So do check those out once you're done here. But other than that, let's get it.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thanks, Matthew, for jumping on the channel. How's it going?
Not bad, not bad. I'm all right. It's a gloomy fucking day in Newcastle, but it's I'm all right, you know. I've got a cup of coffee and I'm here to talk about music, so it could be worse.
Exactly. I think, yeah, all things considered, you pre-warned me before this that the lighting might be a bit gloomy. Like I said, I
Yeah,
think it all adds to the
the
mystique. I'm
mystique.
I'm in a corporate shared office environment, so couldn't be
You're
more opposite.
extremely well lit. That's it. Yeah, you couldn't be brighter. You look like you've got some like doctor's kind of level brightness.
Yep. And I got
Doctor's
a
waiting room.
whiteboard behind me just in case we want to, start scheming and planning,
Yeah,
looking over the
true,
world.
yeah. Yeah. And some like funny looking, you look like you're in a pub bathroom actually behind you, that artwork there.
Oh yeah, well that's the
In
classic.
like a trendy pub.
Yeah, it actually says punk rock and new wave on the wallpaper, so it's kind of like that, very 21st century. We're cool,
Mm,
man. We're like, we're just people making money out
right.
here doing
Yeah,
capitalism.
okay. No, that's great. Love it. Love it. Love personable corporations. It's great.
Well, obviously you've come on for our band in three albums, but I always like to kick things off with a few questions around what's going on lately, and with you guys, it probably couldn't be a more exciting time because I think I've seen via
Mm,
your Instagram that you guys have just come back from some recording sessions out at the Rancho de la Luna. Is that right?
that is correct. Yeah. We got back in the middle of September. We did like 2 weeks there.
Hmm.
And then we were there for like 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, just doing pre-production and writing and getting in the zone and that sort of things. Um, So no, man, it was amazing. We had the absolute time of our lives, to be honest. It was great.
Mm.
We loved it.
I,
What's not to love? You know, it's been like a dream of ours forever to go there.
I was going to
Um,
ask exactly that because I feel like, and obviously we'll get onto this later on, but
mm,
just even based on knowing your music, it's clear that there's definitely, the kind of scene around Rancho has obviously played
hmm.
a part in kind of influencing your guys' sound. So, what was that? It must have just been surreal to actually finally be there and be in that space. Like, what was
It
it
was
like?
surreal, man. It was like it's especially surreal for us, I think, because every time we've ever gone away and written stuff for various records and We have we've always gone to Wales and we've had various places in Wales that we've gone to, like this place we went to a few times back in the early days where we put together Dream Soda, we even recorded Succubus there actually, in this little cottage that was run on just on a farm by this woman called Sally who just liked music and had a cottage she rented out to bands. But fortunately she a few of the other bands I think abused her generosity, and so she shut it all down.
Oh
And then we
man, that
found another
sucks.
place. Yeah, it does suck to be honest. You know, people don't know what they've got. It was like gold dust, that place. It sounded amazing. It was super remote and cool, and yeah, it was amazing. And then we went to a friend's house, and we've been there a few times. So we keep going back to Wales, but wherever we go, we always, in homage to Rancho, used to call it like Rancho Verde or like Rancho Monkey because one of the studios was called Monkey Studios, and Verde because our friend's surname is Green and it was her house, and like so this sort of thing. So
Nice.
we've always called it, and then the first one we called like it was however you call Rancho, however you say Rancho de la Luna in Welsh. We'd called it that basically because we like record everything and we've got it all on files on the computer. So for like naming the files, it always needed a name, you see. So it was
Mm,
always in homage to Rancho. So it's been like a big part of our collective I don't know, ethos, the way that we like to approach things. Rancho was always an inspiration, going out into the middle of nowhere and just letting with in this kind of cool space with I mean they've got great gear there. We didn't always have great gear.
mm,
But with the ethos of just setting up and writing and jamming and recording and kind of getting lost amongst it all, not
mm,
it was we always chose to go to places where there was no phone signal and we kind of put like a ban on the internet and phones and things so that we very much remained in the space together, which we think is really important.
mm,
And that for us, like Rancho always had that sort of feeling, that kind of going out and getting lost in it. So it was always a homage. So when we finally got to go and when we were on tour last year and a friend of ours has been working on their 30th anniversary record that they're doing
mm.
there. A guy called Paul Fraser, who's a great producer, did like a couple of Idols albums and things. And he was out there while we were out there. So he's like, come down and meet Dave at the studio. So we were like, 100%, let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then just became chummy with Dave. He's a lovely, lovely man. And then really when this summer came around and it was like we knew we wanted to record something, we just thought, why not? Now feels like the right time. It was a dream. It was a kind of surreal dream. It was amazing.
Yeah, it
You like
sounds so.
my tiny coffee, by the way. I'm not absolutely massive. This is just a very small cup.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was more of a like forced
It
perspective thing. I'm actually quite
was, yeah.
jealous. But
No, it's yeah. Yeah, so it was awesome.
it's how I love the fact that you've got that, like you say, you've been paying kind of respects to the Rancho from all the way through your history. I mean, that's almost like
Hmm.
manifesting it, right? Like it's just
Yeah, I mean, it
putting it
felt
out
like that.
there.
We discussed that as well because we're into that sort of thing and that idea, and maybe me more so than the lads, but the idea of it kind of we've put the intention out into whatever you want to call it for 10 years or something that we
Hmm.
wanted to record there. And obviously, we're paid to be there. Anyone can pay to be there if they want, but it was just for us, it all just lined up so specially and kind of perfectly that it felt and it's just nice as well to be, Dave's a fan of Demob, and it just feels like, oh fuck, that's quite nice, you
Yeah,
know.
that's so good. Is there
Yeah.
you obviously, there's so much myth around that particular studio, but obviously just in
Hmm.
general, when you speak to musicians or read about musicians, people talk about, certain places, certain times, really and environments having an influence on the sound that you actually are there to end up recording. Did you find
Hmm.
that happen? Did you find that maybe what you'd gone in with took a slightly different shape because of where you were at, because of where you were recording it?
Um, yeah, probably. I think our ambition with this record, because the last record was really difficult to make because it was a kind of lockdown record.
Hmm.
And it was a real hybrid of a record that we'd started before lockdown in like February 2020. And then I took the demos and the kind of scratch recordings that we'd made, and then made that over many months and lockdown months, just beavering away, going a bit insane into the record. And then we then took it and went and re-recorded parts of it in a proper studio and then mixed it back together again to make the record, So
Hmm.
it was a real kind of difficult hybrid process that nearly kind of crashed and burned a couple of times because it was um, arduous. And this time, I really wanted to just have fun and for just levity and lightness and just instinct and intuition to be the kind of name of the game, where we weren't questioning things, we weren't worrying about things, we were just three lads, good friends, going out to a place that we really love, the Joshua Tree, that I've been out there 10, 12 times or something now over the years. And the lads have been a few times, but they really like it as well. And I've got friends out there, and just go somewhere that we really love and make and just kind of relax and rely on our intuition to guide us, don't
Mm.
question ourselves too much. And so I think being out there and being amongst that scenery, and it is obviously influential. You can't really deny, but I think as opposed to it being influential on like a sonic level, I think where it's most influential is the the energetic freedom, the kind of mind freedom that it gives you, because that's why there's so much creativity and so many interesting creative people out there,
Mhm.
musicians and artists and things, because it doesn't feel to me like there's nothing stopping the creative impulse, as it were. It's so free and it's so open and it's so raw that
Mhm.
there's that whatever impulse you have, you can kind of just deliver on, um, without it getting tangled in city noise or city life or distractions. And it's just like there's the idea, comes down and just materializes and is ready to go, you know. And so I think on that level, it was influential. It was just kind of raw and real, and we didn't worry too much and just let go.
Sounds
And then
like
obviously,
sounds like a dream.
yeah, it was a dream, man. And the studio itself obviously sounds fucking awesome. It was just every other record we've made has been, trying to emulate some of those sounds. And
Mm.
then when we went to Rancho, we didn't really even do that much. But we tuned the kit the way we like it, and we did this sort of thing. But then we just kind of turned the mics on, pushed the faders up, and it was like, oh fuck, there's the
There's that
sound, you
sound.
know? There's that sound that we've always loved, and it's right there. And it's not even hard to get. It's just like done, you know?
That's so
which
good.
was
So,
which was cool after striving for it for so long.
totally. I love that as well. Like really gives credence to that the idea and concept that, place there's something to the place. There's magic in the place that
Oh,
you know.
100%, man. I mean, I believe that completely. The on paper, it shouldn't be a great sounding room. It's just like a little kind of rectangular, quite tight room round the back of a house, and it's full of knickknacks and just like odd things, and there's not much sound treatment in there. There's kind of glass, which is always a no-no in studios, and it's like it shouldn't sound good, but it just sounds absolutely amazing. And then you can go to studios which cost thousands and thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands, that have been built new, and they just sound sterile and crap,
Yeah.
you know,
No character.
no character. It's just lucky. It's just magic. Sometimes there is just magic.
So good.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I'm excited about what's to hold. I wanted to run this past you because you might disagree with this, but like of having followed you guys for a while in terms of albums, I always kind of think of Dream Soda as like quite a raw expression of, what makes you guys Demob and like the kind of influences that you have with Holy Doom.
Hmm.
It felt like leaning a little more into that kind of 60s and Beatles-esque element of it. And
Hmm.
Divine Machines feels like almost jumping ahead a decade with more of a sci-fi kind of 70s tone to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you kind of feel that progression is kind of accurate, where would you say this next one kind of ends up?
I think the new one feels to us like it's gonna be it. It really genuinely feels like there's moments of Dream Soda on it, moments of Holy Doom, and moments of Divine Machines. It really feels like the kind of culmination of all of them, like
Hmm.
the kind of end of the story arc. Because when we did Dream Soda, we were like we were young men. It was 10 years ago, and the songs I was writing for that record were very angsty and angular and sort of taking the piss and kind of full of venom and aggression and a lot of like it's not like an easy listening record,
Mhm.
obviously, but it's like there's a lot of angularness to it and this kind of what we always felt was this sort of 90s Britpop meets kind of heavier, kind of sort of riffy music that we'd always liked, like Death from Above or Queens. When we then moved into doing Holy Doom, it was it I think it became the kind of the aggression in what I was writing and the venom sort of loosened a little bit and I was less outwardly critical and became more interested in what was going on in the turbulence in my life. And I think it then reflected that in the songwriting a little bit. It's a little bit rounder, and you say, yeah, it's maybe a bit groovier and a little bit more 60s and 70s, and then that, yeah, and then Divine Machines became this whole kind of utopian, dystopian thing that reflected like lockdown and the times and this the in like the darkest of places, like you can actually find light and change and reason to grow, that
Mhm.
we've got to go through darkness in order to grow, and for me, like I said, it really feels like the culmination of that entire journey is the new record. There's really sort of tender, vulnerable moments on piano and also on guitar. And the guitar ones have echoes of Dream Soda, like the piano ones are more Divine Machines, and the there's riffs which are feel quite Holy Doom, and then there's songs. Yeah, it's a real kind of hodgepodge of all of them, we reckon. In a kind of nod of its hat to like, all right, this is us so far, this is everything that we do. Something like that, I think.
I love that.
Mm.
Sounds great. Okay, so when's it dropping then? When can we expect it?
Well, I've got to mix it first. So we went on tour after we recorded it, and I'm back up in Newcastle for a little while now, and I've got all my studio gear with me, and I'm gonna start mixing it and doing the post production on it and stuff, but I haven't started yet. And I don't know. I'm just gonna take my time on it, really. I'm hoping for next year.
Yeah.
It'll definitely be at some point next year for sure, but when, I don't know. Um, but I'm not, like I say, after the last one was such a nightmare to make and really like nearly broke me making that record. I'm just gonna take this one very easy. But I'm also gonna have a lot of fun with it, I think, and take it off a pedestal and just not worry about so much about it being right and just
Mhm.
worry about it and just care about it being like expressive, for what I want. Um, I think I kind of you reach a certain point, I think, in your artistic I don't know, arc, shall we say, where I think it stops becoming about impersonating or really trying to reach for the things that you hear in other people's music that you go like, really, if the kick drum doesn't sound like that or the snare doesn't sound like that, then it's not right, you
Mm.
know, which is what I did for the first three albums, really like trying to find the sound that I wanted and not knowing how to get it and then I think pretty much achieving it finally on Divine Machines. And then now it's like, oh well, I'll just do whatever because I don't care as much, you know?
You've kind of done it, so now it's like, well, now you're free.
Yeah, exactly. I sort of ticked that box of like I really want to have a song with this drum sound and stuff, and it's like, right,
Mhm.
well, I'm just gonna do whatever I think is cool now, you know? So I'm quite
Well,
I'm quite looking forward to getting into it.
yeah, I mean, I can't wait to hear it. So it
Mm,
sounds for any fan, sounds like it's going to be a banger.
I hope so.
All right, well, I'm excited. Things to look forward to. In the meantime,
Hmm.
I guess the pressing thing at hand. Our band in three albums. The little gimmick of the show is like if we were to try and
Hmm.
explain Demob Happy to someone that's never heard you guys, and we could only pick three records that aren't already yours to do that, what would they be?
Hmm.
You've sent over
Hmm.
some ones, so let's get into it. The first one you put forward was Queens of the Stone Age, Era Vulgaris.
Yeah.
It's Queen's fifth record, released 2007. It saw
Yeah.
the band kind of go into a wiry, more kind of scratchy, dancey direction after what was
Hmm.
probably one of their darkest and most brooding records with lullabies that had been previous.
Hmm.
I hope you don't mind me saying that I hear a pretty strong Queen's influence, from all eras of that band in Demob. So when you
Hmm.
put forward this one, I'm quite interested to know like what made you pick Era in particular.
Well, like we've always obviously like Queens have been one of our favorite bands. I mean, I my temptation at first was to say Songs for the Deaf, and I
Hmm.
thought, you know what, I've talked about that album on podcasts and things a lot. And actually, when I think you think about D-Mob and what I actually think there's probably more of the DNA of era in what we do than Songs for the Deaf, even though
Hmm.
Songs for the Deaf is probably arguably my a more my preferred record of the two, and
Mm.
definitely probably in my top five records of all time. Like that the first time I heard that album, it like blew my mind. Like I was scared of it. It was so powerful.
It's
Um, I,
iconic. It's
yeah, I
unbelievable.
mean the shouting at the start, I'd like never heard anything like it. And I mean it's 20, I'm 34. I think it came out in 2002 or
Hmm.
something.
Yep.
So I was only 12 and I discovered it and I was like, what is this devil music? Like what the fuck is this? And it was
Hmm.
like actually scary. Like I kind of had never heard anything that raw and because like we'll discover I was raised on a diet of like 70s prog rock. So and like 90s electronica. So I'd never heard anything like that. And so yeah, my temptation was to always say that record, but I actually think really, I mean, when you actually think of the songwriting and the sort of almost like you say dancey kind of wonky aggressive sounding guitars with these kind of quite sweet melodies and these really sort of hypnotic drums. I actually think there's more, like I say, in us, really, in that record, despite probably my entire musical career being trying to achieve Songs for the Deaf, you know,
Hmm.
in like all its facets, like its drum sound and the guitar sound. And like I said before, like trying to understand what makes that. I've spent far too long researching that record,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which was another thing about that was so cool about being at Rancho, just hearing firsthand from Dave about that record. And he was talking about it so casually. And we were all there just like on tenterhooks, just like hearing all these nuggets of stories and things and
I can
couldn't quite
imagine.
believe it. It was unreal. Like at one point he was like, he was saying like, what song, he was saying, oh yeah, because I wrote songs off that album. And it was like, oh yeah, which ones do you work on? I didn't know which ones he had.
Mm.
And he was like, it was one of the singles. And he was thinking to himself for a while, just going, what was the name of the song? It was a big radio hit. And I'm going, well, it can't, he would obviously know if it was No One Knows. So it's got to be one of the other ones. And I was thinking for a while, I was like, go with the flow, like which one? And then he was like, oh, No One Knows, that's it. And I was like, imagine writing one of the greatest songs of all time and not being able to remember what it was called, just like, yeah, what was that one called again? Right, No One Knows, one of the most iconic rock songs ever.
Yeah,
So it was like
wild.
it was things like that was like, oh, this is so cool to hear like all of these little tales and stories. But yeah, I just think there's moments on Era that are so. interesting and so like strange and like difficult and unapologetic and it sounds a lot to me like Death from Above, which was another huge coming of age record for me, their
Mm.
first record, with
Do
that
you
same
remember?
aggressive,
Do you remember at the time, like there was rumors that Jesse from Death from Above was going to be in? I remember that was in the fan base, like right at the time. Like everyone was like,
right,
"Who's going to be the next bassist for that tour?" And I think even it came from Jesse himself had maybe said somewhere like, "Oh, I'm speaking to the Queen's guys," and I think there was just like huge buzz about like maybe he would
right.
even be in the band at that point.
I do know the truth of that. I
Oh,
don't.
really?
Who would anyone care? I don't suppose Jesse. Yes. The answer is yes. He was.
Right.
He was almost in the band, um, and he was in it for a little bit, and that was just from like touring with DFA and chatting with Jesse about it and stuff. Um, yeah, um, and so which would have been a wet dream. Like, can you imagine? Yeah, can't even put into words how cool that would have been. Especially if it had been at the time,
Yeah.
like.
Agreed. I
Um,
think even just for a few shows, I think for me, like, there's never any contest between any members because everyone's just, exceptional
uh
musicians.
Yeah, I
But
mean, Mickey Shoes is a
y-
fucking amazing bassist.
it totally. There's no denying it. But yeah, like you can't help but kind of wonder, like, just a few of those Jesse fuzzed out like riffs with
Hmm.
that little putting that flair on it in the
Hmm.
especially like you say around the era Vulgaris time we think of
Yeah,
Misfit Love
well,
and those sorts of songs like it all
that's it.
they were kind of in
And
that.
Joey was playing drums at the time, Joey
Mhm.
Castillo, and like, yeah, what a powerhouse he is. Yeah, man, it would have been insane if they'd pulled it off. Um,
So
yeah, I don't know why.
did you because I think oh, I just want to tell you my story about Era Vulgaris real quick because
Go on.
I love it because this is I became like a real Queens fan in like 2005 2006. So what
Hmm.
was I like 14? 2007 was the first. So Era was the first album that came out when I was like, that time when you get into a band and then they release their first album since you become the fan, and it's
Yes.
like the best thing
Yeah.
ever.
Lullabies
It's
was that for me because Songs for Deaf had already come out, and then I was like,
yes.
and then I saw Lullabies. I didn't even know it'd come out, and it was in Tesco or something. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Oh man, those times where when you didn't know it, like I was going to say when you were talking about death, like I had the same experience you did of like you put it on, Millionaire comes on and it's Nick screaming. But like back
Hmm.
then I had no understanding that you could have a band with more than one singer. So I was like, what the
Mm.
fuck? This tall ginger guy has got like the Elvis thing. He's got this deep
Uh-huh.
tone that I would find out is Lanigan and he can scream. It was just like blowing my
Yeah,
mind.
same. I think that blew my mind as well. I kind of didn't realize that Lanigan had been on it, and I was
Mm.
like, what a range this man has.
Yeah,
You know?
totally.
Wow.
Oh, but I was going to say, so like during Era, they did a competition via like a fan site, and
Right.
the winner of that, you didn't have to do anything. You kind of just entered, and it was luck of the draw. But I won a promotional copy of the track Era Vulgaris, which came out
Oh, nice.
before the band came out, well, before the album came out, and it was kind of sent around being like, have it, for one day only. Keep it to yourself and then share it online. And I've got this like it came in this DVD box that was made to look like an 80s infomercial like dance
Mhm.
exercise thing, and it was like Josh's dance party or something like that on it.
Right. Okay.
It came
That's
with this like
funny.
handwritten note, and it was probably the most excited I'd ever been in my life. I was like 14 years
Yeah,
old. I was like
I bet you
buzzing.
were. I bet you were.
And what a track as
It's
well. I
awesome.
remember putting it on and just being like, what the fuck is this? Like, because that's
Uh-huh.
such a weird song in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not on is it on the record, that one? Or
It's
does
on
it
like
not come
bonus tracks, but it
bonus?
wasn't
Yeah.
like on the core
Uh-huh.
track listing. So yeah, sorry, that was
Yeah.
to derail it, but yeah, that's my
I
probably the one time
remember
I've won a competition. So I always like talking about it.
Yeah, right. And what a competition to win as well. I had tickets to go and see them on the tour for that record, I think. And they came to Newcastle and then for whatever reason had to cancel the show. And then they rescheduled the show and the tickets were still valid. But because this was 2007 or whatever,
Mm.
there was no ticket receipt because I hadn't bought it online. I think I'd gone to a shop to buy it. I lost the ticket in the intervening months and then was like, oh, and then it sold out and I couldn't go.
Oh, savage.
I know it was absolutely savage. And then I think I found the ticket later. I was like, oh, for God's sake. So that's my
Man.
story. Two very sad stories there.
Oh man, yeah, that is a shame. How did you kind of receive Error Vulgaris at the time? Because I think it's kind of known within
Mm.
the fan base of like you've got Error and you've got Villains are the kind of two kind of not controversial ones, but normally the ones that people tend to find harder to place.
That's
You know.
interesting. Uh, I had no problem with it at the time and still don't. In fact,
Mm,
like there are things that I'm still hearing in it. Like I listened to it again just before we did this, just to refresh my memory, and it's cool hearing so many more details that I hadn't heard before.
hmm.
Um, just like how distorted a lot of the drums are and how fucked up it is. And to me, it's like the real genesis of what Queens then came to really master, which is the that kind of Gang of Four style, like interplay between all of the instruments, where you've got the
Yes.
bass, the synth, and the two guitarists, and obviously the drums, all doing this kind of interplay thing where it's amazing sound and it's so kind of disjointed, but like energetic and cohesive that
Mm,
it's this. And I think like the songs on that record were the start of that, in a really, really cool way that I think they then kind of then perfected with smooth sailing tunes like that and
yep.
tunes on the new record which are like that.
Yeah.
I think for me, like it's easily in my top three of their records. Probably that, Songs for the Deaf, and uh probably the first record for Sheer, and then probably Rated R, followed by I imagine Lullabies, maybe. I think Lullabies, Villains, uh, and the end is Nero, that or no, In Times
Times
New
New
Roman,
Roman.
yeah. Um, and like Clockwork, all kind of
Hmm.
occupy the last spot. I'm less buzzed about those ones. But those first, that's my order. That's my official order.
I
That's
love
what
that
I'm
putting the
given.
stake in the ground. I feel
That's it.
like I feel pretty aligned to that, to be honest. Like I think you've got in those ones that you mentioned, there's so many different. I can't say sides of the coin because there's only two sides of a coin, but like
Hmm.
different part of that Rubik's cube that make up this band. And I think what make that
Hmm.
band so rewarding as if you're like a fan, you
Hmm.
kind of start to see all of these different aspects to it, and almost every record kind of represents a different side of it or adds something new to like another you know
Yeah.
cute layer to it. So
I
yeah,
think
no,
that's I think that's what I'm excited about with the new Demob record, is that I think the bands that I've always admired the most are the bands who are so fearless in they're just like, we're doing this now.
hmm,
Even for better or for worse, you've got to
yep,
admire bands that do that. And I'd never I never knew if we did that or not, but people do draw kind of, for me it's all just whatever I felt like writing at the time, right? And
hmm,
then but then other people obviously see distinctions and go and sort of objectively see it more than I ever do, and they're like, "Oh, that's album's clearly about that breakup you were going through, and then only years later, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously it is, even though I hadn't realized at the time, that kind of thing. Um, so I'm really excited about the new record just being, again, like I said a little earlier, because although people probably wouldn't say that about Demob, I hope that all of our stuff sounds the same. For me, I've always been aiming for something and like shooting and missing, but getting closer. And like I said, now because I really felt like I've got the expertise and I've developed my knowledge in production to the point where I know how to get all of the sounds that I want to get. It's like, okay, well, what? And I guess songwriting's sort of by the by. I guess I'm talking about like more production here, but for now, for the sound of the new record, it's going to be less like it's just going to be like its own distinct thing and the next step on the journey. And I'm looking forward to pushing the boat out and it being like, oh, that's a change of direction, but that's cool,
More
into
uncharted
its own
waters.
territory. Yeah, I think so. I hope so anyway. And
Yeah, I
so I
think
would
so.
like other people to be able to say, like we're talking about Queens, like, oh yeah, Euro Vulgaris is so obviously this thing that they did. And for it to be distinct like that. Because we've talked about that a lot in this band that we could make even before going into this record. I took all of the demos and little ideas and little things that we'd amassed and I'd written and we jammed in rehearsal rooms or on tour and over the years that we call the jam jar. And just like before we make any album, we just open up the jam jar and we're like, right, what have we got? Let's see what's in the riff bank. Um, and then because I find it a little bit overwhelming, I started to categorize it into multiple different albums. Like, okay, this has a kind of more like scourgy sort of DFA early 2000s electro rock sound, and there's
Hmm.
about 9 ideas there. And this has got more of like a kind of grinder man kind of sound. Okay, there's like 10 ideas there. This has got like a kind of Pink Floydy Supertramp thing. All right, there's 6 ideas there. And once I'd put them all down, it was like, okay, there's 12 albums we could make here, like right now, just
Yep.
from choosing one of those categories, you know? And so that's what we did. We kind of chose a lane that we all agreed on that we wanted to kind of go for and was like, all right, let's do that now then, you know? Um,
Love that.
but we that's the thing. It's kind of a choice of what do we want to do now, as opposed to what could we do? Because that is like too open. It's like,
Yep.
all right, do we make the ZZ Top album, or do we make the Grinder Man album, or do we make the Supertramp album, or which is all possible and all cool, but it's like, right, well, what do we? But yeah, okay, but what do we want to do now? So I hope there's a kind of cohesion to it.
It
We
sounds
shall
like
see.
it sounds like there will be. I mean, like we were saying before, I definitely feel progression across those albums. So I feel like this will just be
Hmm.
side to the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah,
I
I hope
mean,
so.
so good. All right, well, let's carry on. So number one,
Hmm.
Era Vulgaris. We're going to switch gears
Hmm.
completely. The second one you put forward was 10cc, the very best of 10cc.
The very best of.
This is greatest hit set, Stockport UK band, 10cc.
Hmm.
As with all artists of that generation, I feel like they have more greatest hits comps than actual albums. So I wasn't sure if I was
Hmm.
finding the right one that you put forward because there's only a few on streaming.
There's like, yeah, I think the one that I'm super familiar with is from like 96. I
Okay.
think if you type in like the very best of 10cc, it's the one that comes up. The reason why I chose this, I know it's not like probably the coolest. I know when you like do these things, you're meant to choose like the album with all of these obscure album tracks on. But to be honest, when I was going through their albums trying to choose one, I was like, there are what I love about 10cc is spread over too many of these albums.
Hmm.
And what I grew up on and what really turned me on to them was the best of, you know? So I was like, fuck it, let's just do the best of. Because
I
it,
think
it it ticks all the boxes.
I was going to ask that question, but it makes perfect sense. The only thing I can think of
Hmm.
course, is the classic Alan Partridge
Yeah,
thinking of.
very best of the Beatles. I mean,
But
that's it, isn't it? I wanted to avoid. I do know their albums,
no,
but
but I
I
think
do love the best of.
there's something to that, right? And I think there's something, I don't know if this is your how you were maybe introduced to it, but there's certain artists to me where I picked up from, my parents, and a lot of times in a
Hmm.
car they would have, you know, the best of the Eagles or the best of Fleetwood Mac, and that is just
Exactly.
like when you have when you have that mix of new music experience, nostalgia,
Uh-huh.
and like a very specific place in time, the car ride, the parents before streaming with its like CD, like it just
Hmm.
ingrains such a thing that I don't think you can really knock it, but like the selection of the greatest
No.
hits, because for a certain era and point in time, they really did become, like an album experience, just different. It's
Well,
obviously
that's it. I
completely
mean,
changed now, but
yeah, I mean, if you don't, then you're absolutely just speaking, you're basically reflecting my own childhood back at me because like when I fell in love with a lot of this music was on car journeys with my
mm,
dad being like, right, we're off to Scotland and just putting on like the best of Supertramp. And
mm,
so I know for a long time, what I knew of those bands was that. And then
hmm
I'd listen to the songs and be like, and I'd go to their albums and be like, hang on, but I know what should follow this song, and it's not this one, it's off this other album, like kind of confused. And it was
yeah,
like that for Queen, for ABBA, Supertramp, 10cc, REM, you know, probably not ever the Beatles actually, because the Beatles albums are just too good to ignore. We'd probably listen to all of the way through, but even like the best of like Spanish like rock and stuff,
mm.
just like obscure best ofs. And I think it's great, you know.
It's
There's no
I
shame
think
in a best of.
no, it's an underrated way to get into an artist that I think we've kind of lost in the transition from,
Hmm.
new old to new media, because nowadays you just put a playlist on. I mean, or because it's all available at your fingertips, if you are a music fan, you might, as I tend to do, is like, oh, I'm going to get into this artist, so I'm just going to choose this album, which is known as their best, and then go through it. But when you
Hmm.
used to have that kind of, there was more scarcity in the music of like what was available, you might be inclined to buy a greatest hits, or what I tend to find is that someone in the family or friend had one lying around, and it's like, okay, that's great. You can just, I'll
Hmm.
put that on. I love doing these shows for exactly this reason of like this recommendation, because I would never have thought of linking 10cc to Demob, but when you listen, you go, oh, I get it. I hear it. I hear
Yeah.
certain aspects of it, and they're not a band that they're a band that I've always known have more than, I'm not in love or whatever their huge one is,
Hmm.
but I've just never myself had found the opportunity to go diving into it. So this is a great
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, the other thing I've chosen is Beatles, but and people always say that D-Mob's kind of like Beatles meets Queens of Stone Age, which I'm like, fair play. I'll
Mhm.
take that. But for me, the other side of my musical like upbringing really was kind of 70s prog rock, and nobody does it better than 10cc. Like,
Mhm.
and I think it's the sense of humor and the kind of piss take lyrics and the sort of wittiness and the dryness of it. Like, I was a massive fan of like Monty Python and Faulty Towers when I was growing up, and a lot of that sort of sarcastic 70s comedy. And for me, like 10cc blend that so well with just the most immersive, brilliant production, which just
Mm.
kind of enveloped my senses as a child. And just like some of the most creative melody writing and songwriting, and where it's so unpredictable and so strange, but so listenable and interesting and cohesive,
Yeah.
where you can go through one of their hit songs and it's like five or six songs in one. And
Mm.
I've always aspired to try and jam as many ideas as I can into a song and but also create a cohesive feeling, and their songs are just drenched in feeling, and that comes down to the cleverness of the production and the lyrics and the way that the way that they arrange it and stuff. And for me, they've just always been a real, like I just I don't know many songs lyrics through and through. Like I don't really listen to lyrics, like even Queen stuff. I kind of basically have no idea what the lyrics are to any of them, even like No One Knows. But NCC, I can sing just all the words back to front of all of them. And it's really rare for me. There's even Beatles stuff, I'm like, not really sure what the lyrics are.
Hmm.
But 10cc, like one of their songs, One Night in Paris, which I don't think gets credited enough for what it was, which is an absolute fucking masterpiece. Because I think a lot of the time people disregard them as being a slightly kind of campy, sort of pastiche band, as
Yep.
being just like a bit of a joke. And they
Mm.
don't really recognize the craft that went into it. Like a lot, like I heard, this is not 10cc, but the what's it called? Noddy Holder from Slade said in an interview once, like people don't realize how difficult it is to write an upbeat rock and roll song that isn't completely chintzy and shit, which
Mm.
is what Slade really nailed. And a lot of people just think, oh yeah, that Christmas song. But if you listen to some of Slade's tunes, like it's really difficult to write like a rockin' tune that's not
Deep.
obviously that's poppy and that's upbeat and catchy, and for it not to be utter shite,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it's not easy. And I think that because 10cc have moments where just an objective outer lay, you could be like, oh, this is just a piss take. Like, you know, um, I don't like cricket. No, I love it, which everyone kind of knows is like a funny lyric. They sort of don't see the depth in it, but
Mm.
actually, it's really, really, really difficult to do what they do. Um, and yeah, and like I was going to say, one of their songs called One Night in Paris, which is it's on the best of, but it's the first track on um original soundtrack, their album. I don't think gets the credit for essentially inventing the mold of Bohemian Rhapsody. That
Right.
Bohemian Rhapsody then came along a year or two later and just dominated because it's a 7, 8 minute song that goes through all of these orchestral movements and this kind of it basically tells the story of a man living in Paris, I think. And it's this because they were obsessed with film and Hollywood. It's got all of this nods to kind of classic French cinema and things like that, and all of this sound design where there's like bells ringing on Parisian bikes, and they even I think this is they probably didn't help their own case because they sang it in a sort of like daft French accent,
Okay.
which is obviously going to make people go like, well, this is just daft. Like, what is this? But actually, the music in it and the drama and the chords and the melodies are just unbelievable. And
Mm.
it rocks and it riffs and it's delicate and sweet and it does everything that Bohemian Rhapsody does, but it was first. Um, so yeah, for me, they're like the tip to toe that album, the best of. I can just sing, and it's just non-stop. It's just
Wall to wall.
all the best, wall to wall. You know,
Love that.
yeah, they've been a huge inspiration of just how to be upbeat and interesting and fun and melodic, but satirical and sarcastic, and yeah,
Yeah,
great
I
band. And
think
then the production as well.
it's all in there. There's so much, like, again, I guess for anyone watching or listening that maybe hasn't taken any time out for 10cc, and that I would
Hmm.
definitely put myself into that category of like you got to dive in, because everything you've said is so right. And I think that it's really a unique British sensibility to those songs when you're talking about that sense of humor,
Hmm.
that just you know isn't quite as well, I don't know, is evolved into something else, I think, in later times, and it's very rare to get in music.
Yeah.
And just obviously the songwriters were so well accomplished and refined before they even, from what I understand, just doing a Wikipedia search, like
Uh-huh.
they come from this like place of writing songs for other people before they were kind of put together in this formation, and it's like kind of two songwriting
Yeah.
pairs. So you've got
Well,
this like real meeting of minds when it comes to actual song construction.
yeah, they were a little bit like like a Motown. They were like the sort of Stockport Motown, or like the kind of the Geffen building in New York, where like Carole King came out of, and there's another
Mm.
one of my favorite songwriters, like where it was just like, right, turn up in the morning at 9 and you write and you try and write a hit, and then you leave at 5.
Mm.
And there's something so interesting about that. For me, I just love, I love the factory kind of formulaic nature of it. It sort of takes the glamour out of it, and it's just like, right, write a good song. If you
Hmm.
can't sit here in a room by yourself and write a hit on a piano, then you can fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, and the best of the best can do that. People like Carole King,
Hmm.
and like the that's kind of what they did. 10cc, they learned their craft, just like, right, let's write tunes for pop artists and people, and and they honed their craft as musicians, being like almost like the wrecking crew for Stack, the studio, what was it, Stacks, the yeah, as players, and as their production and arrangement, and they even did stuff with like Neil Sedakis. I think they were his backing band, and
Hmm.
this sort of thing. And so they were a little bit like the Beatles' time in Hamburg. They kind of, before they ever started doing their own stuff, like you say, they honed their craft, and it just shows, man, because it's so well put together and it's so creative and democratic as well. Like, if any one of them could sing the part the best, they sang it,
Yeah.
you know? Um, just real kind of music first. I mean, it's just art rock. It's prog rock, man. It's the best.
That's so
It's
good.
like, let's not pretend.
I've got to, yeah, I've got to give thanks for putting it on my radar, because yeah, I'm going to go diving
Mm.
into that.
Yeah,
I'm
listen to all
conscious
their albums as well, man. They're just yeah,
we got to, yeah,
amazing.
got to go through it. I'm conscious of time, and I want to make sure we cover off
Mm.
our last pick. So
Sure.
number three was Beatles Abbey Road,
Uh-huh.
which obviously is kind of iconic record, 11th album, I believe. I guess depending on how many of the
Hmm.
variations you count. I always want to ask this when someone puts forward like a Beatles record, is like, so I feel people come to Beatles in two ways. I feel like either you were it was the gospel from when you became conscious of music and like you recognize the greatness of the Beatles, or you went through a phase of kind of being like, no, they're overrated. This is like trying to be the trying to
Trying to
be
be Mr.
contra,
Cool,
yeah, and be, and
trying
then
to be
but then people,
contrarian.
exactly, and then people eventually come around and go like, ah, shit, they are pretty fucking good. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
do you, which category do you fall into?
I fall into the first category, the
Hmm.
the the category of being brought up on a diet of the Beatles and plus everything else. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, the I always think when people say they don't like the Beatles, they basically just don't know what they're talking about. They
Hmm.
they don't actually know what music is. If you
Hmm.
don't like if you don't like the Beatles, you don't like music, because like you you can't you can't overstate the influence and the importance of what they did. Um and the fact that, like, yeah, you can just trace the roots of so many things back to them, that it's
Mm.
impossible to just be like, yeah. Like, even heavy metal, like, started with Helter Skelter. It's
Hmm.
like Like Tomorrow Never Knows kind of started kind of trippy like 90s, like obviously Chemical Brothers sampled it, and but I'm in the former camp, the kind of brought up on it from day one. It was a part of my life through my dad.
Hmm.
Um, but I hummed and hawed again about which one to choose of the Beatles. I definitely fall more towards their like latter stuff as being
Hmm.
like everything from kind of probably Rubber Soul onwards is more my cup of tea. Uh, and especially Abbey Road and White Album and kind of moments of Let It Be. And I don't even obviously Sergeant Pepper's gets kind of as one of the greats, but I don't even it wouldn't make my top three or four or even five Sergeant Pepper's, I don't think. Um, but I did hum and haw, but I just felt like Abbey Road has is the culmination of that band and has all of the best of all of them in the most focused kind of clear way. Like
Hmm.
it's John Lennon with Come Together at his most at his coolest,
Yeah.
like at the swampy, cool bluesiness of that song and his delivery of it and the nonchalant, like it's just perfect. Like, and it's perfect on the drums from Ringo, and the sound of it is unbelievable. And it was like later on in their career when they started using this is one for the audio geeks out there, when they were starting to use like the transistor um recording desks, not tube desks, which they had done up until that record, I think. I might be wrong, or maybe up until the White Album. And for me, it's just the pinnacle of the sound of that
Hmm.
band where you've got Abbey Road at your disposal, plus their songwriting. Like the best sounding records of all time kind of started with that and end somewhere in the late 70s. You know,
Yeah.
it's sort of
Agreed.
like just shy of a decade from 69 of Abbey Road to like maybe 78, something like that. And it's just never been bettered. Like that, the sound of the records at that time, where you can put on Dark Side of the Moon, and it sounds like it cost still like $1 million fucking
Yeah.
dollars. Like it still sounds unbelievable.
You could almost,
Um,
I feel like, take taste out of the equation, but you could almost put on any album produced in that era and it will just
mhm,
sound better on an objective, like crisp sound
mhm.
level, better than anything else, kind of either before or after that period. You're so right. It's like
I would
proper
completely agree. Yeah, you can't really
golden
go
era.
wrong.
No.
Yeah. No, it does all sound. I mean, it was the hype, man. It was like it was before digital. It was when they were perfecting a lot of the technique. Like it was the zenith of their songwriting. And then you've got like Because by Lennon, and then you've got Something by George Harrison. And I mean, maybe not Ringo's best. I don't know if I don't actually think he wrote Octopus's Garden. Maybe he did. But another valiant effort for Ringo, but also like some of his best drumming.
Mm,
Um, and then Macca like arranging the back end of that record. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite of Macca's songwriting. Like,
mm,
I love Oh Darling. I think it's very, very cool. And I like Maxwell Silverhammer, but I wouldn't necessarily I think it wasn't his peak. But the way that he organized and very much like manned the back half, it's
mm,
just like pure maca. And yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think because it distills a lot of what I love about the Beatles on that record, if what I've always wanted to achieve with D-Mob was the sweetness and the vulnerability of something like Because or Something, and the coolness and the hardness of Come Together, but then you know, and just obviously the melodic sensibility of the Beatles and the harmonics and the harmonies and things, but then with like a harder, drivier, riffier edge. And so for me, it was even though I probably, if I had to choose a Beatles album as my desert, to die with, probably White Album would be the one, but
Hmm.
Abbey Road. I mean, but then again, like I want you, she's so heavy, like the
That's
way
so
that it
so good.
spirals, it's like just fucking John Lennon at his moodiest. Like it just, man, it's so hypnotic and just cool. Yeah,
Yeah, it can't.
yeah.
There's every time I find with the Beatles, and to be honest, we should be completely honest. There's still albums of the Beatles that I'm yet to like fully dive into, and I kind of
Mm.
like that. I like with certain artists not going all in all at once. Just
Uh-huh.
it's kind of a toss up because then you oft sometimes maybe are left without a reference point. But for the ones that I'm like really in on, every time I kind of do exactly what you just did. You go like, right, I'm going to put my flag in on Revolver's one. I always love to come back to, but then
Hmm.
I will think about like we've just said, like She's So Heavy off of Abbey
Hmm.
Road, or I'm inclined to agree with you about Sergeant Pepper's, but then oh, what's the track at the end, towards the end, with the very orchestral part of Sergeant Pepper's
Oh, A
Day in the
Day in the
Life?
Life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
And then I
is,
think
yeah, truly one of the greatest songs of all time.
Magic. And then you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, I can't count. I can't, there's
Uh-huh.
always, and everyone has got an argument. Everyone's got like, just as
Hmm.
soon as you make a decision, they slip that song to you and be like, oh, you
Yeah.
sure about that?
Just like,
Because
oh
there's this
shit.
one. Yeah, fuck, you're right.
Yeah. But then you do go like all the songs that aren't on those records, but are on Best of the Beatles. Like there's so many tunes that don't make the albums that I often overlook simply just because I just listen to records
Mm,
and then I go, oh fuck. Like there's all of those other tunes that I sometimes just forget about.
yeah.
Like what wasn't on any of the records? Like Strawberry Fields isn't on any of their records, I don't think. Or what is it that's on? Oh, my dad would know. See, this is the perfect time for my dad because my dad would be like, "Well, let me tell you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sit down.
Sit down, son. I'll
Yeah.
tell you. It's all of these, you amateur. But yeah, you know what I mean anyway.
Totally. Oh man, it just makes me want to go and listen to the Beatles.
Go and listen to Beatles, 10cc, and Queens, and then there you go.
Fuck it. I think that's what we
Yeah,
should just leave everyone on. Go and listen to those three records, whichever order you like, but just make sure you listen to them.
yeah, I completely agree. You'll thank us.
Exactly. Matthew, thanks so much, mate. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate
No
your
worries,
time.
thank you.
Okay, huge thanks to Matthew. That was a really fun conversation, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. I really love doing these, and if you like watching them, do consider subscribing because basically, the higher that subscriber number is, the easier it is to get people to come on for a chat. Simple as that, really. Right. If you're still here, if you're someone that likes my content and has plans to actually watch more of it, then this message is for you. I want you to email me, doodlereview.club@gmail.com. Put the subject line as the video that you've just watched, and I'm going to send you something cool. The idea here is that I really want to take this community. It's a small one, it's a tiny one, but I want to take it out of YouTube and do something else at some point. I don't know what that is yet, but if you email me, you're going to be the first in line for it, and I will get back to you with something cool based on the review that you've just watched. All right. Cheers for watching. Take care. Mind how you go. Cheers, mate. Bye.